welcome back if you've been here before. My name is Beth Ann. Today I wanted to talk about two recent reads that I got from the library and need to return. The first is graphic nonfiction. This is Redbone, the true story of a Native American rock band. This is the one I was most excited to talk about. And then I want to just mention briefly Locked In by, I'm actually not sure how to say his name. I think he's Danish. So maybe you see Adler-Olsen. But anyway, going back to Redbone. So this is a fascinating account of a Native American rock band that started in the 1960s and was active through the 1970s, and then still sporadically was putting out albums and going on tour even after that through the turn of the century, I think. And the book, it's so interesting because the book was really pulled together by a fan of the band who became, who's from Europe and became a fan, I think, after they were really most active, like in the 2000s. And in consultation and cooperation with the family of the two main members of the band, he led pulling together this amazing volume. I've since listened to some of their music and it's really good. So this is just an amazing find for me. So the structure of this book is we're following the daughter of the two main members of the band. The two main members of the band are Pat and Lolly Vegas, who were key members of the band throughout its entire lifespan over decades. And then there were some other musicians who were with the band for varying amounts of time. Pat's daughter, Frankie Vegas, is the narrator for much of this book. And so the structure of the book is we get modern day panels like this, where Frankie is talking to her dad and she's hearing the story of Redbone and in particular their most active days and what that was like. But then interspersed with that, we get a different style of panel, which is these historical panels, because Redbone became a protest band that was following and supporting and active in the Indigenous resistance movement of the 1970s and beyond. So this panel, for example, is describing the formation of the American Indian movement. And one thing I found really powerful about this, actually on the previous page, that's timely for today, is a lot of those early actions and that early formation took place in Minneapolis as a center of resistance. So that's what this page is talking about. And then the page I just showed also talks about the formation of the group United Indians of All Tribes and the occupation of Alcatraz. There are other pages in here that talk about, here we go, Wounded Knee in 1973. So you get like snippets and reminders of these really key moments in history of Indigenous movements. And then interspersed through those, we're getting the retrospective sort of look of Pat Vegas telling his daughter the story about how all of this came about. I was trying to find another 2-page spread of the modern story. They're basically in like a restaurant, and Pat Vegas is telling her daughter about all of these things. So it was, this was wonderful. I mean, I got to learn a little bit more about some key moments that I've learned about in other contexts, but it was different seeing it through this lens of how the music, some of the songs were inspired by these major moments of Indigenous peoples' protest. And then hearing about this band where like a lot of the proceeds that they made were just funneled right back into Indigenous rights movements. And so getting that sort of angle on these important historical events was really wonderful. And the book is beautiful. So it all comes together really well. It was also interesting just to hear about the original formation of the band. Pat and Lolly Vegas had both gone to Los Angeles to try to make it big as rock musicians, and they started out playing local shows on the Sunset Strip. They would get called in to be musicians to support other bands, And so they played with a lot of really famous people before they were famous. Like they played with Jimi Hendrix before he hit it big. Their music was a major influence of the Doors. And so when I went and looked up their songs and was listening to them, it's like you can hear those elements that they're a little bit, some of their early songs are just a little bit ahead of those musical styles, but you can kind of hear the continuity. And then some of their biggest hits from later in the 70s and onward are just really good songs. So I was also just really excited to discover a new band, and a little surprised that, this was a big deal. Like they were touring throughout the US, they were touring in Europe. They had, chart-topping hits. And so to have not heard of them before was really disappointing for me. So I'm glad that I've been able to rectify that. So this was great. And I picked this up. I reserved it for my library because Leslie over at Books, Gurs, and Purrs reviewed it. And I was like, that looks amazing. I want to experience that book. So I'll also try to remember to link to her review down below if you want to see what she thought of this. So that was one of my recent reads. This was another library pick. Often when I go to the library, I go with my daughter. And as part of keeping her engaged, she picks out books for me. So usually she'll pick out like 3 books, and then I'll say, okay, well, I'll pick 1 or 2 from the ones you picked out to take home. And she's only 8, so she's not like actually really evaluating the books. She just likes going down like the grown-up book aisle, and she'll just kind of pick things that are interesting. So I assume this stood out to her because of the big yellow font. This is a like police detective thriller. I didn't realize it's actually the 10th in a series and maybe the last one in the series. So my reading experience was definitely reflective of that. And in this one, the main detective of the series, Carl Mork, he's been like the key guy leading all the other 9 books in the investigations, and his little team, it's called Department Q. I think they tackle cold cases, so they do the really crazy stuff. They do the serial killers, the things that are really, really hard, and so they have this like hotshot reputation. And in this book, some elements from Carl's past have come back to haunt him. So a previous member of the local police of the police force that he's part of had been convicted prior to this book of being a corrupt officer and being involved with drugs, and it turns out that this guy who had been a friend of Carl's before all of that had given Carl a suitcase to hold on to him, and Carl had put it in his attic and totally forgotten about. And now, for some reason, I forget, the police have become aware of this suitcase, and it turns out it had massive amounts of cash and drugs in it, and Carl is like, well, I didn't know it was there. That seems a little suspicious. Like, if you're such a great detective, like, why wouldn't you go investigate the suitcase that your friend asked you to hold, who turns out to be a convicted criminal? Like, I don't know. I would go check the suitcase. Carl had some other things going on in his life at the time, so the book tries to say that it was understandable that he didn't, but interesting. But anyway, so Carl has essentially been framed because the reader is on Carl's side. So we fully expect that Carl has been framed. Carl has been imprisoned. There's some other shady stuff going on because it seems like that his superiors, the police that he works with, like, they're not shocked enough by this. They're not immediately doing enough to protect him. And this is particularly a problem because he's a very experienced, highly decorated cop who's put a lot of people behind bars, and now he's locked in the same prison with them. And so there's immediate threats to his life that are not taken as seriously or acted upon as quickly as they should be, which is concerning. So little flags, right? So Carl's sort of stuck on the inside with very little information, just trying to survive. His friends and the people and some of his closest coworkers, the members of Department Q, folks are trying to work on the outside because they're convinced he's been framed and try to uncover what's really happening. It definitely did have like the fast-paced, going through the unknowns, figuring out what's happening sort of sense that you like when you read this kind of detective thriller. But I think because it was the 10th book in a series, the characters just had like the briefest little like introductions because probably the only people who read this are ones who are already familiar with the characters. And then also the reader wasn't taken along as much through all of the revelations of the evidence. I feel like the best detective novels, it's like you can go back and reconstruct everything that happened. Um, and while you're reading them, you're going to be having those like moments. And there were those moments through there where you kind of realize like, okay, this person just said this suspicious thing, like I bet they're going to follow up on it. But it didn't have that sense of like I could put the pieces together if I'd like I like when I read a book like this, when I get to the end, if I have this sense of like, oh wow, if I had been reading it, like if I had been taking notes, I could have pieced it together or something like that. um like it was fairly obvious at some point in the book like where it was going to go, but the exact person that ended up being the linchpin person I didn't think was, I guess, set up kind of as thoroughly, so that you could have that really satisfying feeling when you get to the end where like either you nailed it like right before the characters did and you're like, I got it, I know what's happening, or it's a surprise but then you're thinking about it and you're like, oh yes, all the dots are connected. Like the reader was not aware of enough of the dots, I think, to have that satisfying feeling. So that was a bit disappointing. However, I did think this was pretty cool, and like the allusions to some of the past cases that were gone through in like earlier books in the series, like it was all pretty cool. And this is one of the like best-selling Danish detective series things out there. So I definitely wouldn't be opposed to picking up the first book in the series and just trying it from that earlier standpoint. So I guess what I'm trying to say is this was enjoyable for me. Definitely captured elements of like I can't put it down because it's stuff's going on. But I guess more of a me problem in like, yes, I picked up the 10th book in a series. Yes, it's going to suffer a little bit because of that if you haven't read the earlier 9 books. So I don't know. That was my experience. Would love to know if anyone else that I know here on YouTube has read this author or read these books, and if you'd recommend me picking up the first one. So I've been babbling on for a little while, but thanks for watching if you got this far, and I will see you on the next video. Bye.